Welcome to another episode of Come Together. We are back, ladies and gentlemen, with another episode of Come Together. Solo episode. Solo episode today. I actually recorded I think maybe 3 or 4 solo episodes in the last month or so that I just haven't posted. For the video, I have a tiny little coffee here that I'm a big fan of, espresso, Nespresso, double espresso glass. Um, but yeah, I don't know. I wasn't really too happy with content, even though I made my way through the 40, 45, 50 minutes that I like to post for solo recordings. Um, I I don't know. I didn't feel great about them. And I don't know whether it's because they were forced or whether or not I just hadn't done it in a long time. Solo episodes like that. Um, it's been a couple of months now. Instead of doing it maybe once a week or once every other week, it's every month or two that I'm posting solo episodes, and that's obviously for better, I think. So yeah, I don't want to spend too much time talking about that and rambling on that. I had a bunch of things that I wanted to talk about. I got my handy dandy piece of tiny paper over here. And there's actually a bunch of different topics on there that I kind of wanted to start talking about, or at least trying to be thoughtful about and present. And just to kind of put out some information for people to think about. And the first thing that actually was really the last thing on my list was, but I guess has become the most culturally relevant, and not just because it's a news topic, but because I think it generally embodies a perspective and a philosophy, or a clash of perspectives and philosophies. And that's this whole platforming argument or debate that's been going on now. Who can I talk to? Who can I not talk to? Who should I talk to? Who should I not talk to? To what degree would something be considered, endorsing or pushing back? What degree is it not? And and I think that rightfully so. By the way, I actually think that it's really important that we have both sides, um, really pushing their perspectives on this issue. And the reason why I think it's important is because I think that when something becomes a hot topic conversation, it really forces people most of the time to be relatively thoughtful about it, or at least gives you a lot of information and a lot of context to be able to kind of make your own, to draw your own conclusions based on a really, really um, it's there's a lot of information to pick from. There's a lot of information to choose from, and as to whether or not you even want to have this platforming conversation or debate or not. And so on one hand, people will say, well, it's a really terrible idea to platform people that spread bad or stupid or hurtful or wrong, rhetoric or conversations, and you shouldn't even have that conversation. You shouldn't even make it available. You shouldn't even post it online. It's not going to work. And then there are the people that respond that say, well, I think that it's important to talk about these things because whether I agree with them or not, ignoring a topic, ignoring a conversation, banning people from talking about it, as we've seen in the last 5, 10 years, um, if not more, but definitely at least the last 5, 10 years, uh, doesn't work. Doesn't stop people from really thinking what they're going to think and feeling what they're going to feel and looking for what they're going to find. Uh, I feel like this is also kind of the root of the gun control debate, in a lot of senses. I think, in the kind of the sense that, on one hand, someone's going to be like, well, listen, here's another case of gun violence, and obviously we're insane to have so many guns and so many weapons available so easily. And on the other hand, someone will be like, well, listen, a gun itself is amoral. A gun does not act, people act. If someone is, and so what gun control laws ostensibly might be make the most sense is to kind of do, uh, a mental health background check, a check to see, is this person part of, has this person ever been a legitimate threat, someone that has, manifested violence or encourages violence or supports, or is mentally unwell? Is this person bipolar? Is this person prone to anxiety attacks or manic waves, or what's this person like? And then you kind of make a decision on a case by case basis. Um, and I'm sure people could probably say the same thing about platforming and the degree in which that you push back, right? And I don't, I kind of tend to, and my personal opinion on this topic is to err on the side of have the conversation, because I don't think that anything that anyone is going to do is going to stop the conversation from happening. Um, there's obviously the most rampant and the most relevant uh, example, or human manifestation of someone that's been attempted to be canceled in every institutional sense possible would be a guy like Nick Fuentes, who literally, I believe, just has like his Rumble platform. Like he was banned off YouTube, banned on Spotify, debanked, deplatformed, kicked out of, I believe, either dropped out or left college. Um, but really, like, no, like he was considered toxic for anyone to touch, and no one would host him, and no one would do anything with him. And what ended up happening was he found a way to get his idea, to get his listeners to listen and to spread his ideas. And it happened, quote unquote, underground, the same way that the hippie movement kind of happened with underground newspapers and, informal, um, ways of passing around information, whether that's books or music or libraries or, again, new underground newspapers and stuff like that. As long as you have platforms like Rumble, as long as you have platforms like that are committed to ideas like free speech, no matter how institutionalized or no matter how quote unquote deep platformed someone's going to become, their ideas don't just disappear into a vacuum. They don't go they don't just go nowhere, especially if you keep at it for long enough. And I mean, Nick Fuentes, I think, is in his late 20s now, started this in college. So anyone that invests a decade into anything that they want to do, and into, it doesn't have to be politics, it doesn't have to be a news show. If you do what Nick Fuentes does for a decade, and he decided that he wanted to do real estate, or he decided that he wanted to go into tech, or he decided that he wanted to do education, he would be enormously successful, because putting that much effort every single day for a decade is a recipe for success no matter what. And so what ends up usually happening is these ideas that are quote unquote deplatformed, where no one will have a conversation, where no one will rebuke or understand or ask to elaborate or ask or force, for example, Nick to expand on some ideas that he's had. Without that happening, we have a much more dangerous outcome, um, potentially dangerous outcome, and that would be the infamous echo chambers, and that would be the infamous, like we need, all people, and I think I've talked about this. I don't remember whether it's on one of my unpublished solo episodes or not, but we need people, human beings need real-time feedback on their behaviors, on their ideas, on their perspective. And that's actually one of the reasons I think that one of the issues that we have as a society today, which hopefully, we're on the way to course correcting, excuse me, but one of the issues that we have as a society today, as far as I see, is, or as I see it, is people are, aside from the fact, it's a huge issue that people are isolated and lonely a lot of times. It's a big issue that a lot of people, especially young people below the age of 30 or 30 or below, typically do not have as many friends as they've historically had, as many social connections, as many in-person embodied relationships. And a lot of times, these in-person embodied relationships are the things that keep us honest, because we learn through reading other people's faces, through reading other people's responses, through reading the room, through getting feedback. You make a joke and no one laughs at the joke, you put the joke aside. It's not funny anymore. If you make a joke and everyone laughs and everyone loves it, and the next thing you know, someone else is is telling the same joke to their friends another time, and you're like, wow, that was a really great joke. I'm going to keep that up. And the other one was like, yeah, I don't know about that. So I think that I think that there is not only enormous value in not doing this whole deplatforming thing. I think that the danger of it is that it causes this weird the consequence, what arises from not having conversations and not platforming, especially people that have huge followers and huge followings, is there's no reality check ever. There's no putting your finger on the pulse and being like, oh shoot, no one thought that joke was funny. No one thought that idea was a particularly good idea, and actually, a great example of this that would never have happened had no one ever pushed back or given anyone a platform was and actually I was talking to a friend of mine who a very close friend of mine. I'm going to keep him anonymous for now, although if he listens, I'm sure he will know that I'm talking about him. We're talking. I was obviously Israel has been an enormous topic recently of conversation, uh, and it has been really ripping apart the modern right wing political coalition, but it really kind of manifests itself everywhere because, whether you're into politics or not, politics impact news, politics impact business, politics impact and for better or for worse, one way or the other, you know, Larry Ellison buying, Paramount and, CBS and putting Barry Weiss up there. Like, yeah, you could say I'm not interested in politics, but there's a very clear political agenda that is going on over there that's in the world of in the world of business, the world of entertainment, the world of news are all having this are all being impacted by politics. So on one hand, it is totally fair to not be interested. On the other hand, it's a little silly to deny the far-reaching influence that politics have on everyday life. People, I don't care about politics. I care about my bills. Well, if you care about your bills, don't you want to find out what's causing your bills to be so expensive? And like, if you don't want to find out, that's totally fine. But that doesn't mean that there aren't forces that are impacting that. There aren't economic uh, strategies and economic what's the word for it policies, thank you, that are that are affecting and that are having an impact on the cost of food or gas or whatever it is. So uh, and this Israel conversation has really been has really been for the last couple of years, probably since October 7th, really has been just absolutely enormous. It's just been swallowing up everything, and everything falls under this conversation now. JFK and Epstein and foreign policy and wars and Middle East policy and I mean everything. So it's become a huge conversation, and one of the prominent anti-Israel voices or critical of Israel voices that's come up. I don't want to say anti-Israel, but critical of Israel's policies and behavior as a country is Dave Smith, and he recently had a couple of really great debates. One with the Trigonometry podcast, which was I think 2.5, 3 hours, which was really really excellent, and he had another really long form one with Coleman Hughes, and he was really great. Now I've been listening to Dave Smith because it happens to be that first of all I found him to be a really really persuasive and dynamic speaker, debater. Um, I like a lot of his. I think that a lot of his ideas about policy, economic policy, even like social ideas. I tend to think they're pretty good usually, and I really do like the general anti-war perspective that he's pretty consistent about across the board. He's extremely consistent about across the board. That's actually what people find so challenging about debating with him is that he has this the same moral standard for everyone and everything, and he's completely consistent with it with this idea. And the issue that people take with it is that they say it's not realistic, and his argument is, I don't care whether it's realistic or not. Let's keep that as the yardstick that we're going to measure by. Civilian casualties, bad. War, only if we absolutely need it. Find another way to figure out to resolve your problem without blowing up civilians. It doesn't make a difference whether it's in Israel or Lebanon or Syria or America or Iran or Iraq. He has the same policy. He has the same perspective about everything. But you know, but he is extremely harsh on Israel and their influence. You know, especially with their historical entanglement with the military-industrial complex, Republicans from the early 2000s in America, and he has a couple of really great quotes, you know, that he's brought up, and like, you know, he said, "Well, this guy who was a four-star general," I don't want to, you know, you should go and listen to the podcast if you haven't heard it. It's his debate with Coleman Hughes on Coleman Hughes's podcast. Was really really great again. But Coleman Hughes says, "Well, listen, there's no, you know," and so I thought that was a really great point. He brought up the point with Coleman, and I thought, and I've heard him say this, you know, with Douglas Murray, and I've heard them say this in other conversations, and Coleman Hughes was able to do his homework and is able to do research it and was able to appropriately push back and be like, hey man, like there's no actual record of this. There's like a side conversation he was having with someone else. You can't tell me that entire foreign policy is going to be based on, you know, what, you know, like a little side, like maybe it is, maybe it isn't, but like that's not good enough to like point all the problems of a country on another country on a couple of like, you know, off the record, you know, chit chat conversations. And that, if Coleman had not made that, had not had the debate with Dave Smith and had not made the time to have a conversation with him and quote unquote platform him and let him make his points, there I would never have realized that that was the context of the conversation, and I never would have understood that. And so now by embracing these ideas, and now by embracing a conversation and preparing yourself for a debate and listening to the points that other people make and looking into them and responding to them, sometimes you win and sometimes you don't. And sometimes your ideas are really great and sometimes they're not. So, you know, there are plenty of points that Dave made that were great. There are plenty of points that Coleman made that were great. And the same thing happened with the trigonometry podcast. I think that overall, generally speaking, these long form, multi hour conversations, debates, podcasts, whatever you want to call them, they are good. Like they do lead to generally really good responses. And the only times that people don't like them and the people don't respond well to them is typically when they feel like they've lost. I mean, I imagine, you know, if everyone walked away from, you know, and I don't know. So I think that the platforming conversation, uh, is one that's kind of over in the sense that I think that the popular consensus and the overall impact that's made by these long form debates, and you watch them, and especially now, I mean, it's cool. Like you could really track how many people are watching these and viewing these and how relevant they are. I actually would make a really strong case that the clips that we watch of these debates are way worse than actually watching the debates themselves. And that's because, again, the clips are always subject to nitpicking, or always subject to changing or removing or reframing context. Terrible, terrible, terrible idea, in my opinion. And you know, you have this 2.5 hour debate. If you watch if someone posts a minute and 15-second clip of a 3 hour debate on Twitter or on Instagram or on TikTok and like says, "Oh, dunks on him," you almost are. You could bet you go to the bank, you know, 7 days a week and cash in, knowing that it's probably contextless. So so I think that the platform and conversation should really just be, hey, you are getting a lot of listeners, you are having a big impact, your ideas are something to be acknowledged. Whether you agree with them or not, they're ideas that are obviously making some kind of impact and influence. Let's talk about them. Let's see. And by the way, and it also depends on who the debater is and how the conversation goes. You know, like a Pierce Morgan show tends to be real sloppy, real messy, everyone yelling at each other, yelling over one another. Okay, fine. Like that's got a certain, and I would personally call it a little bit of more entertainment focused as opposed to content focused, you know, conversations. Like it's more about entertainment factor and yelling and shock and you know, kind of getting those like clicks. But then you have like the Lex Friedman debates, or you have the, again, you know, like the debates that Rogan will host, or that, you know, people will have in good faith one on one or whatever it is. And those really, really, really tend to just like be great And I think even with like Nick Fuentes, right? Like there's two cases on both Tucker Carlson and with Dave Smith, where Dave Smith, the famous thing about Nick Fuentes, the Holocaust denier, Holocaust denier. And then Dave Smith said, dude, what's your story? And like, do you really not believe that like 6 million Jews were killed? He's like, I don't know, maybe it's an exaggeration. It's like, dude, I don't think it's an exaggeration. He's like, yeah, okay, I'm not really prepared to like, fight about that. That's not a hill I'm going to die on. So like, in just that conversation, in just saying, hey man, do you really think that? And like really confronting an idea, you're forced, like someone in Nick Fuentes' position or someone in Dave Smith's position or someone in anyone's position, when you're generally confronted with an idea that you are not 100% certain about or confident in, you're probably going to leave it behind because, hey, I'm not really willing to let my whole reputation collapse based on this hot take that I want to have, but I don't really have all fleshed out. And the same thing with Tucker Carlson when he was talking to Nick Fuentes and pushed back to him about, the Jews. And he says, listen, if you have a problem with the state, with the way that particular individuals or a particular government behaves, hold the government accountable, hold the particular people accountable. But we don't, but he says, as Christians, we don't believe in collective punishment. And Nick Fuentes had literally no choice, but he was like, yeah, that's a good point. So like, again, does Nick Fuentes really believe this? Maybe, maybe not. But does his several million followers that I'm sure are flocking to see, hey, wow, Nick finally is on Tucker Carlson show. Hey, look, wow, Nick Fuentes is debating, is having a conversation with Dave Smith for like 3 hours. It's going to be great. And they go listen to it. And then they hear the pushback. And then they hear Nick say, yeah, I don't know if I really believe that, like, I can't really argue with that. Think about the impact it has on those millions of people. Everyone that just said, the Holocaust was a fake, the Holocaust wasn't real, and now, when push comes to shove, and when you have a debate with someone that's really prepared, like this documentation, and you're really prepared to, really slug it out, you're not really willing to do it the same way because, yeah, it's one thing to spew, like what I'm doing right now. I'm spewing to a camera. I'm talking to an audience that will listen to this either live or at another time. Like right after I post this, or in 6 months, or in 5 years from now, someone's going to listen to this, and someone could confront me on the ideas that I'm talking about today, and I might fold. I mean, I don't think I will, because I think that, again, like I'm trying to present an idea and present tangible anecdotes and cases in which those ideas are supported, but I'm certainly not beyond saying ideas that are not completely formed, fully formed. And with that, I'm going to jump into the next topic. 1 second. I'm back. The next thing I wanted to talk about, if you hear a little noise in the background, it's because I got my 6-month-old over here who woke up from her nap, and she does not want to go back to Laila Tov. She's going to go back to sleep. But yeah, so that's really my take on this. I think that more conversations are good. I think more debates are good. I think that the amount of good that comes out of a trigonometry / Coleman Hughes kind of debate, that's the kind of good that we really need to really kind of get people a little bit more on the same page with one another, because I think the most of vehement disagreement and the most aggressive or harsh debates come from places where you don't understand the other person, you can't understand the other person, and so it just doesn't make any sense and doesn't align at all with any kind of form of reality to you. And once you can understand that person, even if you don't agree, at least it's a reality that you could understand that how it exists and how it, permeates. And whether it's for you or not, or whether you agree or not, at least you guys could coexist in the same world, and hopefully get along, and hopefully, not be one of the, not everything has to be so polarizing and divisive. So that being said, the other topic I really wanted to talk about that I actually did record a previous episode about, but I think is really, really important, is the idea of the institutional breakdown, and whether or not to, when there's a breakdown in institutions, right? When there's a breakdown in, let's say, trust in news, for example, which is obviously extremely relevant for the last decade, if not more. Um, there's two ways that you can approach, obviously, trying to correct it. Um, you can either try to recapture the institution and recorrect it, and and reset the course of where it's heading, or you can create a new alternative. And so in the most relevant example and the most pop example in our culture today would be obviously the rise of podcasts as a form of alternative information, where someone like Danny Jones, who would never get his own show, he does, a lot of extraterrestrial, excuse me, excuse me, extraterrestrial or ancient civilizations, or a lot of architecture, archaeology, excuse me, and stuff like that. He has a 3-hour podcast a couple of times a week that goes deep diving into a lot of these ideas. And even if none of them are conclusive, or even if you don't like them or agree with them, you can learn a lot that is just not available. And so even if the pieces that you pick up, you have, imagine, I mean, the way that I like to think about it is that you have a puzzle, and the news puts the puzzle pieces together for you. And then the narrative collapses, and then all the puzzle pieces are on the floor again. You pick them up and you try to figure out what to do with them and what the picture really is supposed to look like, because the first picture didn't look great. The next thing that you can do is try to figure out a new picture that comes up, but you could at least acknowledge along the way, even if the new picture that comes up is not the right picture, you could say, hey, but we still know that we have these pieces around. And I think that's really important to be able to have available. When you have conversations with Huberman, or when you have conversations with Lex Friedman, yeah, then and these conversations would never happen or probably would not happen in a classroom setting, would not happen in a news story, or would not happen in an interview done by Fox or CNN or something like that. Then these are alternative perspectives that are coming up that are replacing the larger problem at hand, which is that there are gatekeepers, and the gatekeep and again, this is also has to do with the idea of who's to say what ideas are allowed or not, and so ideas are going to kind of make their way into reality one way or the other, no matter how much you try to hold them down. So what do we do? Right. And I actually think that you kind of have to try to do both. I think that the total destruction of institutions is a big problem, because it really does leave people with nowhere to turn as far as trust goes. And it leaves people without any kind of tangible idea as to what is considered true or reliable or believable. And, so I think it is important to kind of have at least an attempt at recapturing a broken institution. On the other hand, I think that long term, the issues that cause that institution to, decay and to fall apart, those problems typically are human problems. And we have to try to find, and by observing human nature and understanding human nature, we have to be able to try to come up with a little bit of a better system than the one that we have. And, and what's cool about podcasts, for example, is that it really is a meritocracy, in the sense that, in the sense that no one's going to find you unless you're really good. And there's so many podcasts out there. There's so many, I mean, there's millions and millions of podcasts out there. How does anyone succeed? The only way you can succeed, I mean, there's a couple ways to succeed. That's not true. You could kind of force your way to the top, but you can always tell whether that's manufactured and they don't really stay around very long. Or you could, again, with merit, with ideas, with conversation, with hard work, with homework, you come up with something that is true, enticing, exciting, nuanced, and educational for people, and they're going to dive right into it. And you see that the people that are at the top of the charts, their philosophy is that they're great humans a lot of times. That their humanity tends to shine, and their humanity directs their curiosity and directs their projects and directs their passions, and the combination of humanity and hard work leads to some of the greatest people in the world, some of the greatest scientists and athletes and doctors and engineers and physicians and researchers to want to participate in this really good idea structure. So I think that institutions are important. I think that as time goes on, they obviously need to change and do change. I think that the same reason why, the same way that we have the printing press and then the internet, um, the same way that we had that one evolved into the next, there's always going to be evolution of these kind of concepts. And I'm back. Sorry, I had to put the little girl down. And it seems to me, just continuing in the same train of thought, that we need institutions because I think people like the idea of security. I think that people like the idea of someone taking care of them. People like comfort. People are willing to trade almost anything for comfort. And that's what we really crave, right? When you want all the money in the world, what does that really mean? When someone desires money, when someone desires a bigger house, when someone desires, generally the things that we're looking out for are things that provide us ultimately comfort and protection, and that we don't have to worry about threats, and we kind of just want to be free to live our own lives. The problem, I think, becomes that in order to achieve a certain level of comfort, you have to sacrifice a certain level of independence and individuality. And that's that's in some cases a good thing. For example, when you're driving in the street and everyone comes to the same conclusion that, hey, we're going to uh, abide by the laws of traffic, that when there's a sign that says stop and there's four of them, then everyone stops and everyone takes turns going, whoever got there first. That's an important society. Like, okay, yeah, you're giving up a freedom, but you're doing it so that you don't have X amount more car accidents every year. Um, when you agree to abide by a speed limit, it's because if you are driving in a place that is congested and has a certain amount of people that are crossing on foot or going to shops or foot traffic or real traffic, then there a lot more can happen that you don't see. And so we're all agreed together collectively to limit some of our freedoms of how fast we're going to go in a car for the sake of security. But how far are you willing to go with that? And to what extent do you go? That is, and so that is the importance of having two parties or two perspectives. When you loosely say liberal or conservative, what you're really saying is, how strict are we going to be about maintaining the rules that we currently all are willing to play by? And do we need more rules or do we need less rules? And let's see as a society how we're doing. And if we do need more rules, then we should definitely implement that. If we need less rules, we should definitely implement that. We rarely go from unfortunately, we really go from having more rules to having less rules as time goes on. And part of the reason why is because when people get more rules, when there's more rules, there's more power. When there's more regulation, more people have control over what other people can or can't do. And that's something that in human nature is inherently addicting. It's something that is extremely, extremely powerful, because if people do what you say, then you control resources, you control potential, you control how much safety or not you have, because other people are willing to bend to you. So the desire for power is really the desire to control, or at least a portion of it exists as a desire to control resources. And that could be resources as in money, or it could be resources as in public opinion. That could be resources in, it's really important that I get validated. And, it's really important that people like me. I think people think highly of me. Um, so I'm reading right now, actually, a book called Creativity Inc., written by Ed Catmull, who was the president of Pixar for many, many, many years. And I actually emailed him, try to get him on the podcast. I have to give him a couple of follow-ups and see if I could get him. But it would be such an honor to talk to him. But he wrote this book called Creativity Inc. And I actually, it's one of the many books that I kind of I picked up when I was in high school or college and discarded because I didn't see the value, because I was missing a lot of context and knowledge. And now, now I'm turning 30 in less than a month. December 7th. Today is November 18th. And and I have a lot more context. And so I picked the book back up a couple of weeks ago, and I've been inhaling it. I've been flying through it. And one of the things that he talks about, one of the goals of the book, is how to try to maintain a creative environment in a very, you know, in a business or in a corporate world. And it's a really, really interesting conversation and book. Uh, there's one chapter that talks specifically about something called the baby and the beast that I want to get into. The beast is basically corporate interests and the need to make money and to create capital. And the baby, and I think he calls it the ugly baby, because the ugly baby is filled with potential. It is like not fully formed yet, but it has all the seedlings and all the potential for like to really, really be something great, right? And that's what people really always find so beautiful and so awesome about babies in general, is the notion that, hey, there's so much hope. This kid could turn out to be really, really anything. And so he said that, so a very frequent part of, and he talks about the film industry and the movie making process like this, right? You got corporate companies that care about the bottom dollar. You have the studios and the corporations and the banks and the marketing teams and whoever it is, and they all care about, they all care about the quality, but they care more about the amount of money they make, because they know that even if they make a great piece of art or a great piece of work, if it doesn't sell, then it doesn't really help anyone. And so life and business, he says, is about balancing. The beast is never satisfied, is always hungry. And and actually I think that, and I've talked about this in a couple of episodes, one with John Perkins, the economic hitman, one with a couple of with Lawrence White, the economist, and the professor who's actually in England right now. I think he just retired and he's doing some work in England now. But one of the things that we talked about is the fact that when our quarterly earning system puts enormous pressure on companies to show everyone at all times how they're always making money. And sometimes a good business plan, I mean more than sometimes, very, very often, a good business plan takes more than a quarter to implement, especially when you're a business, a conglomerate the size of Disney, the size of Apple, the size of Amazon, the size of Netflix, right? You're like, oh my God, like, yeah, how do you ever, like you do need to keep on making these decisions that keep on bringing money in, and every quarter the expectations go up dramatically, and every year the expectations go up, and the whole notion of and so you become less and less inclined to take care of this ugly baby, because after all, it's just a baby and it kind of is ugly, and we do have bills to pay now. So let's just kill the baby, not actually kill any babies. But kill this really great ideal with a lot of potential, and not tend to it, and not help it come to life, and not see that you can try and give it an education and see what it has a natural proclivity towards. You're just throwing it out because, right, listen, I understand that you got to do it, but you want to do it, but there is just not enough money. There is just, sorry, we just need to make money right now. And that is a huge issue as far as our general perspective goes, which is, I don't have time to take care of these cute little ideas. I don't have time to be risky. I don't have time to, or I don't have the effort, or I don't have enough resources to pursue something meaningful, something I'm passionate about on the side. There's just not the means to it. And the problem is that philosophy is really, really difficult to argue with, because you can't say you're wrong, right? There is always things you can do to become more secure. There are always things you can do. There are always things you can do to become more secure. There are always expenses that are coming up in your life, and unexpected things. And Charlie Kirk used to say, and I was not a huge fan, but and I never actually really even listened to him while he was alive. But one of the things that I saw going around that he was always emphasizing was have more kids than you can afford. And one of the reasons, I would imagine, one of the rationalities is you're never going to be ready for these kind of things. Like if it comes down to like, hey, I want to wait till I'm like 100% ready, that I'm going to be like 100% prepared for a commitment to another human being and get married, it's never going to happen, Al. I'll tell you right now. It's never going to happen. You are never going to be 100% confident. You are never going to go into the day of your wedding being 100% certain that this is the person you're going to spend the rest of your life with. Unequivocally, nothing can go wrong. There's always risk. There's always risk. And yeah, you want to minimize it, that's fine. But if you're going to minimize it, the risk to the point that you're not letting any potential come through, you're not letting this ugly baby, you're not taking care of this ugly baby in your life. Everyone's got ugly babies. There's an ugly baby of your passion. There's an ugly baby of a side project. There's an ugly baby of a relationship that you always wanted to pursue that you never did. Or, I kind of want to go out and meet new people, and, maybe I'll go to like a brewery or meet someone new or go to a cigar shop and say hello to someone. But it's late. I'm tired. It got, daylight savings, and it gets darker earlier, and I'm so tired, and I worked so hard today. No one's telling you that those things that you're saying aren't true. And they are true, which is why there's such good arguments, is why it's so easy to get away with. But when we become a world of people that ignore these babies, when we become a world without passion, without excitement, without risk, without the potential to have conversations that are unpleasant and to pursue jobs and ideas and podcasts and creative expressions that are not guaranteed to work and don't necessarily listen. I mean, even from a business perspective, my dad's business that I work with him has been around for 25 years. He's put 6 kids through Orthodox Jewish private school, and and I have no idea how he did it. I have no idea what he did, how he did it. My dad's both my parents are heroes as far as I'm concerned. But, my dad in this particular way as an economic caregiver, which is so not relatable to so many young men in today's world, that my dad, that he founded a value, and not only a value, a necessity to pay for his kids' tuition and to put them through higher education and to put them through school, whether, regardless of what he personally thought of it himself, because he just thought it was going to be what's best for his family. He had a business that has been around for 25 years. He and I recently went to open a line of credit, and and got declined because we didn't have. I think the bank in order to give us $50,000 of credit, we had to have at least $25,000 or $50,000 in cash in our bank account at that particular moment. Regardless of the business history, regardless of how much revenue we did, how much business we did, regardless of what assets and inventory we have, regardless of all that. Sorry, there is so little appetite. There's so little room for risk. And by the way, and you can understand why there's why risk makes people nauseous, because the way that it's perceived, risk led to the 2008 crash. Risk led to the dot-com bubble crash. Risk, but that's not risk. That was outright corruption. That was outright bad policy. And there was and the consequence of bad policy was safer policy, but there's still a whole group of people, a lot of people, that weren't doing anything wrong either way, and we're totally fine. And now life becomes almost necessarily more complicated and more difficult, and becomes more restrictive. The safer we vote, I guess, and everyone says you get the government you deserve. That if we become so addicted to safety, we become so addicted to comfort, and we become so addicted to feeding the beast as opposed to protecting the ugly baby, then we're going to live in a society that doesn't take risks. And we don't take risks socially. Relationships are dropping, like the rate of relationships are dropping like crazy. People do not have as many friends as before. People do not feel connected. People feel like there's less opportunity now than before. Opportunity comes from someone taking risk. The reason why I have a job with my dad is because my dad took a risk. The reason why, hopefully in years from now, I'll be able to support my family with the podcast is because I'm taking a risk by doing this. This might never turn into anything. I might be spending hours and hours and hours of my life and weekends and giving up time with my kids and time that I could have spent investing in another business or in sales or in in my own learning or reading or teaching, my teaching career. There is significant risk to what I'm doing right now. Now it's risk of time. It's not a financial risk. It's risk in investment, but time and investment are some of the most, like effort are the most important things that we have. I mean, that's what we only have X amount of years of our lives, and of those X amount of years of our lives, we're only capable of being productive for a certain portion of that time. And if most of my effort, most of my waking conscious effort is going towards making this as great of a podcast as it could be, then that's enormous risk that I'm taking on, right? And hopefully the reward will be that someone else will have opportunity as a consequence of that. So I guess this is a very roundabout way of saying that I think that as a world, we have to become, especially as Americans and as a country, we got to open up our appetite for risk again. We got to open up our appetite for trying new things. And listen, I'm a pretty conservative guy when it comes to resources, right? I don't want to sacrifice. I do like a certain level of comfort. I'm not giving up my job full time because I do need to know that X amount of money is coming in every month. I'm not giving, there's certain things that I do value. I own a home. I could have put, the money I put on my down payment on my house into another investment and tried to make money on that. But I think it's important for me to have a home. And so I'm more conservative in the sense that hey, I prefer that stability. But I think we need to welcome potential failure and potential risk. And I think that when someone says that they're trying something new, that we shouldn't degrade that or laugh at that, and we should try to support it. And and again, as far as conversations go, someone has a idea of a business and it sounds stupid or it sounds dumb. I don't think it's the meanest thing in a nice way to say to someone, what about this? Or have you thought about that? Or why don't you try, what about this problem? How would you go about resolving it? And a lot of times you're doing that person, especially if you present it to them in a nice, regular way, you're doing them one of the biggest favors you could ever do them, which is you're forcing them to re-examine ideas and to solidify them and strengthen them. So to summarize, I guess, deplatforming to me is a little bit of a silly word and concept that ultimately ends up being dangerous and harmful. Have more conversations. Bad ideas get just swept up, in the wind and tossed away, and good ideas and the ideas that at least have more merit are the ones that stick around more. Baby and the beast. There's always going to be the side of us that needs the comfort and to provide and to create and produce value, but we can't forget about the potential of tomorrow and the potential of this quote unquote ugly baby that we don't know what it's going to look like, but with our help and by paying attention to it, we could actually see how, what it's good at and what it could grow at and turn into. And so we need to find a balance between the two of them. Work a full-time job. I'm not saying don't take on responsibilities, but pursue a passion. Pursue something that makes you more than an accountant, something that makes you more than an investment banker, something that makes you more than a teacher. What makes you more than what your 6 hours, 7 hours, 9 hours, 10 hours a day job is? Same thing with relationships. Same thing with family. You could be safe. You could be at home. It's always easier. It's always cheaper. But what does it really get you? So I think I'm going to call it here. And I'm actually a little dry on the podcast pipeline at the moment. And today I hope to do a lot of work into spending time into getting some more guests for you guys. But for now, I will see you when I see you all. Bye, everyone.